Hello, this is Amber Willenberg from the U of L Libraries, and in this video, we're going to talk about developing a search strategy and using that search strategy to find scholarly, peer-reviewed sources and other general, non-academic sources for your research project. We'll start by talking about scholarly, peer-reviewed sources. Let's take a look at this article, Lying, Liars, and Lies, Incivility in 2016 Presidential Candidate and Campaign Tweets During the Invisible Primary. This is a scholarly source, but how do we know this? First of all, we can read the abstract to see that the current study investigates the extent to which incivility via lying accusations was present in major party candidate and campaigns' expressions on Twitter, and that the authors collected tweets from party candidate and campaign Twitter feeds to conduct their investigation. In other words, the purpose of this article is to present research. This is a key feature of academic articles. They add new knowledge to an ongoing scholarly conversation. In this case, a larger conversation about social media and political campaigning through research. Next, we can see that the authors work at the University of Arizona and California Polytechnic State University. Academic articles are most often written by professional scholars associated with a college or university. You can see that this article was published in American Behavioral Scientist. If we Google this title, we can easily find out that this is a peer-reviewed journal, meaning articles published in the journal undergo a formal review process involving other scholars reading and responding to the work. Finally, if we scroll to the end of this article, we'll find an extensive bibliography with pages of citations. Academic articles are written as part of a larger scholarly conversation on a topic, and the bibliography shows how the authors have situated themselves within that conversation. By citing peer-reviewed sources like this in your own research, you're participating in the scholarly conversation as well. Compare this article to another article we'll take a look at. Social media usage is at an all-time high. That could mean a nightmare for democracy. This article is not peer-reviewed, but that doesn't mean we can't use it for our research. Sources like news, magazines, and web sources written for the general public can still be useful for researchers like you. They are published much faster than peer-reviewed articles, they can provide a quick overview of an unfamiliar topic, and they often bring in different voices that aren't represented in the scholarship. Non-scholarly sources like this are often found via Google, but you will find some magazine and newspaper sources through the library as well. Sources like this are usually much shorter than academic articles and don't contain pages of citations, although they will often cite some sources. Non-scholarly sources are also sometimes written by reporters or journalists. When you're looking at non-scholarly sources of information, especially those you find through Google, you always need to assess the credibility of the information. One quick trick for assessing non-scholarly sources is to simply open up a new browser tab and search for information about the source. Don't just trust what a source tells you about itself on its own page. If we open up a new tab and search for NPR, we can see that it is a non-profit media organization established by an act of Congress. The Wikipedia page for a source will often tell you about the source's funding and potential biases, which will help you determine if it's a credible source of information. If you ever have questions about the reliability of an unfamiliar source, you can always talk to your professor or a librarian. Now that we have an understanding of what academic and non-academic sources are, we can talk about finding them. The library is the best place to get started with your research, and is especially useful for finding peer-reviewed sources. These types of sources are expensive, and your tuition dollars help pay for the library to provide access to them. While you might be able to find some academic sources on Google, you'll often run into a paywall and not be able to read the whole article for free. Another issue with searching for peer-reviewed sources on Google is that you'll probably get millions of results for your search and have a hard time narrowing the results down to high-quality academic sources. In library databases, your searches will return fewer results, but those results have been curated by humans who decided that these sources are useful for academic research. However, because library databases are more specialized, it's helpful to develop a strategy before we begin searching. Let's say that we've decided to research the effect of social media on political campaigns. If we were using Google to do our research, we could simply search for "how does social media affect political campaigns" to get results. In library databases, though, we'll search using keywords, the most important words from our research question. In this case, social media and political campaigns are the most important words from our question. We don't just want to stop there, though. It can be helpful to think about ways of broadening and narrowing this question with our keywords. We could add specific types of social media to our list of keywords like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We could also think of different ways to search for political campaigns, like elections or presidential campaigns, and even include a broader term like politics. Finally, we could add additional keywords to make our search more specific, like United States, if we want to focus on how social media affects political campaigns specifically within the US. Brainstorm as many broader and narrower keywords as you can. Having more keywords gives you more options for your search, so you don't get overwhelmed or stuck when you start searching. Now that we have a list of keywords to help us search in library databases, we need to think about subject areas. The library's resources are organized around academic subject areas, so you need to think about what subject areas might be relevant to your research topic. What kinds of researchers are writing about social media and political campaigns? We might think of communications, political science, and sociology and add these to our list. Once you've developed your search strategy, you can begin using that strategy to find sources through the library. Let's get started on the library homepage, library.louisville.edu. If you're off campus, you can still use the library's resources. You'll just be prompted to log in with your ULink ID and password when accessing our resources. The best place to get started finding peer-reviewed articles is our subject guides on the left side of the page under Quick Tools. These subject guides divide up library databases by subject area, making it easier for you to find the most relevant resources for your research topic. Remember, one of the subject areas I identified for my research question on social media and political campaigns was communications. So we can click on the Communication Studies subject guide and find a handful of the very best databases where we can search for sources in the field of communications. A database is simply a searchable collection of thousands of sources, most of them academic articles. Since you're all researching a wide variety of topics, I'm going to go to the Any Topic guide and click on the first recommended database listed here, EBSCO Academic Search Complete. EBSCO Academic is a multidisciplinary database that covers a wide variety of subject areas. Most of you will be able to find sources in this database, but feel free to search in other subject-specific databases as well. In EBSCO Academic, one of the first things you'll notice is that there are multiple search boxes at the top of the page. This is why we developed our search strategy with a list of keywords. We'll enter one keyword per box. Let's try some searches. First, we'll put social media in the first box and political campaigns in the second. This search gave us over 800 results. While this is not a lot compared to Google, it's a lot for a library database. But remember, we've already brainstormed several narrower keywords, so we can easily narrow our search down by replacing social media with Twitter. I also noticed that many of my initial results were about other countries, so I'll go ahead and add United States as a third keyword. We now have around 150 results about Twitter and political campaigns in the United States. While we need to look through these results to see if they appear to be what we're looking for, this is much better than the 800 results we had before. Just keep in mind that you'll probably have to try out several searches with different combinations of your keywords to get the most relevant results. On the left side of the screen, you can see that our results include academic journal articles as well as magazine and newspaper articles. These magazine and newspaper articles are non-scholarly sources of information, and because you're finding them through library databases, you know that they're credible sources. Remember, you can also find non-scholarly sources through Google, but you will need to move outside of the source to assess its reliability. At this point, you can begin looking through the articles to find sources that seem relevant to your research question. I'm going to go ahead and click on this article, Tweeting for Votes: How Candidates Utilize Twitter as a Campaign Tool. One thing to notice is the abstract. Always read the abstract because it will give you a quick overview of the whole article, helping you determine if it's useful for your research before you read the whole thing. Another helpful tool here is the Cite button. Click this to get the MLA citation for the article. Just be sure to check over the citation and make sure everything is correct. If you decide you want to save this article to read later, there are a couple of options you can choose from. First, you can see if there is a PDF of the article available on the left side of the screen. If so, feel free to save that directly to your computer. Another option is to use the email tool on the right side of the screen to send yourself the article. If there is no PDF, you can click on Find It at U of L to see if we own the article or if you need to request a copy of it. When you click Find It, you'll either see a View Full Text link, which will take you to the article, or a button that says Request Item through Interlibrary Loan. If you see that request button, that just means we don't own the article, but we will request a copy for you from another school. Just click that button and fill out the form to place a request, and we will send you the PDF of the article, usually within a few days. If you ever have any questions while conducting research, librarians are here to help. On the library homepage, click Ask a Librarian to chat with us Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 and find more ways to get in contact with us. You can even schedule an in-person or virtual research appointment with a librarian for in-depth research help. Thanks!